Welcome to this special edition of Cox Forum. Recently, Cox Communication announced its plans to rapidly transition its Cox at Home high-speed internet customers to the company's new self-managed network. The move was designed to provide enhanced performance, long-term service stability, and increased satisfaction for Cox customers. Now, after Excited Home announced a bankruptcy, Cox accelerated its rollout of its new residential internet service and the launch of its new network. Excited Home was one of Cox's third-party vendors that provided service to roughly 550,000 of Cox's residential high-speed internet customers across the nation, including 80,000 customers right here in Orange County. Now, the transition to the Cox network is well underway, and we have Rick Guerrero, who is Cox Orange County's Vice President of Broadband Network Engineering, here to talk about it. Welcome, Rick.
How are you doing?
Very good. And on this special edition, we will be taking a look at some emails that have been coming in to support.cox.net, and that is where you can also go to ask questions as well. First of all, Rick, we briefly touched on the fact that this transition is going on because of Excited Home's bankruptcy. What exactly is going on right now at Cox as far as this transition goes?
At Home was our ISP partner for a number of years, and as this year progressed and their financial situation became a little more dire in nature, Cox decided that it really had to take more control of the network and started building its own infrastructure and began the process of getting our customers ready for Cox high-speed internet.
Now, when it was first the
hearings at the bankruptcy court started proceeding, we really had no choice but to move up that timetable, and we've reacted accordingly and have our plans well underway to get the conversion completed.
The most obvious thing that people are going to see, people who are on the at-home service right now, is the arrival of this conversion kit. I think by now most people have heard about it. They've gotten emails about it. Can you show us what it looks like?
Yeah, the conversion kit is this nice toolbox here, as you can see. It's going to be delivered to your doorstep, and in that toolbox it includes a lot of important information that will help you make the conversion from the at-home service to the Cox high-speed internet service.
Okay. Now, first of all, how much of this can we keep? How much should we throw away at which point? Because it's a nice package, but...
Keeping the box is optional, but obviously you want to keep as much of the contents as you can, because you will continue to refer to that as time goes on. An example of some of the information that's in there, there's a customized letter that includes a very important 12-digit authentication code that you must use to first register with the Cox high-speed internet service. There's also a CD-ROM that you will be using to physically convert your service in your PC, and there's a very informative user's guide that helps walk everybody through some of the common questions that occur whenever you change software in your PC. And lastly, there is a quick reference guide that allows you to get some real quick ideas on how to fix some problems, and allows you to write down some of the important settings that you may refer to later, months down the road.
Okay. Now, I know when I get new software, the first thing I do in the package, take the CD out, pop it in the computer, and double-click on it, and click yes to everything. And is that a good idea here?
That's a very good point. That's the intuitive thing to do. But in this case here, the CD-ROM kit itself actually says to make sure you read the instructions. The instructions tell you that the first thing you must do is go to members.cox.net, and you authenticate your services with a 12-digit code before you stick the CD-ROM in the player.
Okay. Well, let's back up a little bit. You know, we've all been hearing about the arrival of these kits. At this point, is everyone supposed to have one of these?
The kits are starting to arrive in the mailboxes. Some people have already received them, and they will be probably delivered within the next week to the rest of our customers who have not received them to date.
Okay. Now, if we don't get a conversion kit, say, by the first week of February, what should we do?
There's a URL that we'll post here that you can go to and order a kit for yourself. But in the meantime, just be patient, because they are being delivered as we speak.
Okay. So we shouldn't worry if our neighbor's gotten one, we don't?
That is correct, but there is a point in time where I think if it's been a few days and everybody else has one, you should go to the URL and order it yourself.
And we have right now on the screen the site you can go to if you are interested in, finding out whether or not you're supposed to have received a kit already. And again, you can just go to the Cox.com and site, and there will be certainly a lot of buttons to click there to get more information about the conversion, because certainly this is a big undertaking for Cox.
Yeah, that's a good point. The support site that we have answers a lot of frequently asked questions and can definitely walk the user through most problems that can be encountered when they attempt to authenticate via the 12-digit code, or convert their software using the CD-ROM.
And right now we're kind of looking and seeing what to do. And this is the first thing that we do. You mentioned the authentication code, and that is where you put it in there.
Yeah, it's very important that you accurately enter the number and your primary username, and at that point it will confirm that you have been authenticated, and what that process is doing is setting up your, reserving your email names in the Cox high-speed internet service.
Oh, no, that's a good point, because a lot of us have had these emails addresses for a long time on the at-home, and we kind of are proud of this, the first half of the name. You know, should we be concerned about losing that name?
Although it's possible, we make every attempt we can to reserve your email names on the new service, but it's important that as soon as you get the kit, you definitely go in and do the authentication, because that will guarantee that you're using the email name and reserving it on our new service.
Okay, so that's the first thing you want to do, is make sure that we're reserving that. What do we do next as far as the software?
When you're on the support site, you will get a chance to change passwords, create your very first password on the new high-speed internet service. You'll also have a look at all the existing email service names you have. And if you'd like, you can also establish your web pages, personal web pages, on the Cox high-speed internet service.
Okay, now that's something, an interesting point. Some people did have their own personal web pages on the old at-home site. What happened? What's going on in that transition?
They will have to import the content from those servers to the Cox high-speed internet servers. And when you go through the authentication process and you walk through the web space setup, you'll be asked to, you'll be given instructions on how to import that information.
Okay. As we mentioned before, we've been getting a lot of emails on support.cox.net. Let's take a look at one of them right now and see if we can get a direct answer directly from the big guy here at Broadband. Why is Cox.net website so slow, especially the conversion page? We've been referring people to this page, but a lot of people are seeing it kind of crawl. What's going on?
That's a good point. I think people have to understand that this conversion process is happening nationwide, and most every day we have about 25 to 30,000 people converting.
Wow.
So I think the key here is to, if you can't get through first, perhaps try off-peak hours, and that might solve the problem for you, but really try to be patient, because again, people are doing this all across the country, and we encourage people to do that, because it is very important that you finish a step, but patience is the key here.
Okay. Now, let's talk a little bit about, you talked about that being slow. How about the phones? You know, a lot of people are, you know, getting these kits, they run into a problem, and they naturally, you know, run to the phone and call the number they usually get real quick service on, and they're getting these warnings that they may be waiting for quite a while.
Well, as you can imagine, anytime you install software on your PC, a lot of things can happen. People's experience varies by their individual PC. But the key thing, again, is back to the point of patience. There are people doing this all across the country. We're finding that most of the calls that people are making are very simple solutions to email setup problems. Think about how long your settings have been as they are with your at-home service. And when you go in and change your email names and your email server settings, you may have to create new accounts and change passwords, and I think those things just, you forget how to set those things up to start with because you did it so long ago, and you may just need a little bit of quick customer education on the back end whenever you call us.
Yeah, but that basic information, is that included in the kit? So maybe if we actually read what was in the kit, that might help a little bit?
That's a very good point. The user's guide is extremely informative. It goes over how to set up email boxes in Outlook Explorer. And if you go to our members site, it also talks about setting up email in a variety of different, such as net. So you can get a lot of good information by going to the website about our conversion process and about frequently asked questions. You know, there may be a problem which requires you to call, but definitely try the user's guide and the web site first.
Do that first. And how about time of day? I suspect that most people come home, they get the mail, they finish dinner, sit down, great time to do my conversion, about 7 o'clock. And then they try to get customer support, and they're on the phone for a long time. Is there a better time to do this?
It's better just to try to call at non-peak periods. You're exactly right. The people come home from work, they'll get the kit and maybe eat dinner and figure out it's time to try to do this thing. And if they have a problem, they'll call when everybody in Orange County perhaps is doing the same thing. So it is important to try to do this at peak periods. If you get a busy signal, try to call back again. But again, patience is the key in this conversion process.
Okay. Now let's take a look at another email now from support.cox.net. And this next question is, I went through the conversion and my password doesn't work. That's got to be a very frustrating experience. What happened there?
People should understand that when you go through the authentication process, you're actually setting up a fresh password. You can use your old password if you'd like, but it's important that you type it in lower, very important step here. And if in fact it fails, when you go to the authentication site, you will note different ways to get in the authentication site, such as your telephone number. So definitely try again. If in fact it fails multiple times, unfortunately, you will have to call the care center so they can manually push your password through the system.
Okay. Now, is this just the main password on your main account? Is that what we're talking about here?
For starters, you will be setting up your main password, but you also have to go in and change all the passwords for your child accounts, your second and third email addresses, and also when you set up your email client, you have to do the same password changing there too. So it's important to remember that all accounts have to change.
You know, you bring up a good point here when you talk about multiple accounts. Now, under the old Cox at Home system, we had a certain number of accounts. Compare the new Cox.net system with the Cox at Home in terms of the email experience.
Very similar email, number of boxes, web space is very similar, but one of the key things about Cox high-speed internet that was not available with Cox at Home is the ability to check email via webmail, which means that if you're traveling, you can access the internet maybe in a hotel room or at a friend's house through dial-up, and by going to webmail.cox.net, you have access to all your mailboxes.
Wow. And is that that's sort of like a Yahoo or a Hotmail account or something along those lines?
Absolutely. This is a very, very good product enhancement that we've made. I know I travel quite a bit, and it's very nice to be able to get my personal email as well as my company email, and to do so in such a simple way.
Okay, let's continue to walk through the process here. We have got our email set up. We're going to assume that the password went in and everything. Now we've got the CD. What are we going to do next with the CD?
The CD-ROM, you should insert it in your CD player and follow the instructions on the screen. There's a number of buttons that you hit throughout the process. There's also an acceptable use policy that you must at least scroll through and get to the bottom before it lets you accept it. The point of that being, it's really important to understand the ways you can use the service and the ways that you can't, but basically it's following the instructions on the screen.
Talk about that real quickly. Are there any changes in the way that we can use the Cox.net service versus the Cox at Home service?
They're very similar. The services are similar in many ways. This is just our way of making sure that you have at least understood what our intentions are in setting the service up.
Okay, very good. Now, when we refer back to what we talked about at the very beginning of the program, don't just put the CD in and let it roll. We should go through and take a look at a few things before we put the CD in and hit it. What are some of the things that we might have to think about or set up or get ready before we actually start the conversion process?
The main thing is just follow the instructions which point you toward the website first. That's the first thing you must do. And another thing you might consider is don't delete your existing at-home software until farther down the process when you've successfully migrated your service, and at some later date you can always do that. But it's very important that hit the website first, do the authentication, set up all your email accounts, and then put the CD-ROM in and follow the instructions on the screen.
Okay. Now, one of the questions that you're going to be asked when you look on there is whether you have a USB or a NIC connection. Talk about the difference there and how we can tell the difference.
Very good question, and we're hoping that you won't have to crawl underneath your desk to find that out. But there are some graphics that we're showing, and a USB is on the right of the screen, and the NIC card, the NIC connector, it looks just like a normal phone jack.
Just a little bit thicker, though.
That's correct, and you will be asked to enter in which one you think you have. So it's very important that you do that correctly, because depending on which one you type, the software acts a little bit different.
Okay, and if you do have to pull it out, do you have to pull it out of the computer, out of the back of the modem? What's the easiest way to check?
Usually at the back of the computer, the connection will be the one you need to check.
Okay, let's go back to our emails at support.cox.net and take a look at our next email. This one, I finished the conversion and my primary Cox.net email works, but my additional email accounts don't work. What's going on here?
In this case, you might want to double check how you've set up your email client to make sure all your passwords have been appropriately changed. If in fact you added secondary accounts at the time you did the authentication process, it may take 24 hours for that new email box to migrate through our system. So definitely double check all your settings would be the first thing I do.
Okay. Now, like you mentioned before, a lot of us set up our initial email accounts years ago, if we were some of the first users on Cox at Home, and some of the information on there might be a little dim for us. We might not remember what some of the names or passwords were. Is there a way to find that out?
Once again, in the email, there's sections that describe how to configure all your email, primary and secondary accounts, and also on the website, if in fact you do not, you have a different email client, some of the more popular ones, Netscape and the likes, you can find instructions on how to set those up on the website.
Okay, very good. Let's take a look at our next email from support.cox.net. And by the way, that is a good place to go if you have any questions and you don't want to wait on the phone. If it's a peak hour, go ahead to go to support.cox.net. A lot of good answers there. This one here, something you just mentioned, I use Netscape for my internet browser and email client. Do I have to change to Internet Explorer or Outlook Express? Let's back up a little bit. You know, we've seen on some of the short programs that Cox is running right now, the constant referral to Outlook Express and how this is the new default email client. Other people like other things. Kind of a talk about that whole transition.
Sure.
We'll talk about what people can do if they want to use something else.
A lot of people have their own preferences for browsers and email clients. Cox has chosen Outlook Express to be our common platform. However, you can use other platforms, but you will not be able to get support on those platforms if you have problems. We decided to put some email setup instructions for Netscape on our website because a lot of people use it, and years ago the at-home default browser used to be Netscape.
We all got that.
So we're trying to be sensitive to that, but the other side of that is there's only so many platforms we can become good at supporting, and frankly, if we tried all of them, then this user guide might be 6 inches thick and would have been delivered with a forklift instead of the mailman. Okay. So there are some limitations as far as who we can support, but there are a lot of good bits of information on our website.
Now, in particular email clients, there are a lot of different ones, everything from things like Eudora, Pegasus. Those will all work with the system with the settings that you describe on the website?
That is correct. The POP settings and the SMTP settings, which are outbound and inbound mail settings, are pretty consistently set up between email client to email client. And as a matter of fact, if you are what we call an advanced user, there are instructions on the website that lets you get instructions as to what those settings are, as opposed to letting the CD-ROM do that for you. So depending on how comfortable you feel doing that yourself, that might be an option for you, especially with these other email clients.
Okay, so that brings up another point. If you are an advanced user, do you need to use the setup on the CD-ROM?
You don't necessarily need to use a CD-ROM, but you definitely need to change all your email settings with respect to POP and SMTP, because that lets you point to the Cox email servers. However, the CD-ROM also installs some diagnostic software that in the future, should you ever have a problem, our customer service representatives might be able to ping out to your computer. You might be able to do some connectivity tests yourself and report the results to us, and that might speed up the troubleshooting process on our end. So it's doing more than just installing Internet Explorer.
Now, with all the talk about spyware and things like viruses and stuff, some people are a little leery about putting new kinds of software on their computer that might let people look at their computer. Talk about what's on that software. And you mentioned it's a diagnostic program, and is this letting Cox look inside your computer and see what you're doing?
That's a good question. That's certainly never our intention. It is primarily a diagnostic troubleshooting guide. And if people load that on and do some tests, you can, for example, test between your PC and the internet, and you can tell, for example, if you don't have connectivity, where your connectivity is breaking down, and that might be important information to report to this customer service rep you're working with to diagnose your problem. So it's not spyware, so to speak. It is really meant to aid our troubleshooting and solve your problems quicker.
Was there anything like this on the old at-home service?
Yes, there was a diagnostic tool on the at-home browser. It was just buried a little bit deeper into the software where you had to dig to find it. This is more prominent on your desktop, so that could be some of the concern. Okay,
let's talk about the desktop. A lot of us, when we have the at-home, we still have the at-home icon on the desktop. We might have the Excite Assistant on the desktop, and all those kinds of things. You mentioned in the beginning we shouldn't get rid of our at-home software or whatever else. What can we get rid of off the desktop during this whole process?
The icons on your desktop are more just quick links to the software, and after you've successfully converted, you can certainly do that. You will also notice a new Correct Connect icon that Cox's software installs on your desktop. However, you will not find a Cox branded button to click to get to the internet. You will need to look for the Internet Explorer icon and click that, and that'll be your new connection to the internet.
And likewise, to connect to your email, you would click on what?
On Outlook Express.
Okay, so those would be the two, unless you're using one of the other.
That is correct.
As well. Okay, so we've gone through document email, we've talked about web browsing. Another thing that a lot of people like to use are news groups. Does the new Cox.net support that?
Absolutely. We have a full range of news groups, just like any other ISP, and part of the conversion process via CD or the advanced users describes what the news server settings are. So you can definitely set them up yourself or use it via the CD-ROM.
Okay. We have another email coming in at support.cox.net, and this one has to do with having trouble getting the conversion. They have getting the CD. Can I convert without the CD? We mentioned that a little bit, and getting the settings. You can get that. Right?
Absolutely. Once again, the member services site for Cox is very, very thorough, and it does have a button to click if you are an advanced user. And part of that is listing all the email settings and news server settings. And so definitely take advantage of that if you know enough about your browser and your email client to set that up yourself.
Okay. Now, obviously, with all this turnover, a lot of people who don't have high-speed internet right now are wondering, is this a good time to try to get it? What about the new users?
It's always a good time to get Cox high-speed internet. So I would encourage people to order service with some of the new features we've added. It's an even more robust product than it was before. So now's as good a time as any.
Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about, for people who don't have high-speed internet access and don't understand the difference between a dial-up modem and using their cable. Obviously, if they're watching their program, they already have the cable. What's the difference now between using their phone line and the cable for?
It's a good question, and I think our mantra all along has been the high speed of the product. If you're used to a dial-up connection and you convert to a cable modem connection via Cox, you will probably not believe your eyes for the next few weeks. So you really get to enjoy the internet for the reason that today's internet exists. A lot of broadband content, a lot of large files. You can move that around, send those things to people so much faster than you can with a dial-up modem. In the old days of dial-up, if you wanted to download a large file, you probably had to call the pizza guy, go put on a movie, and maybe by the end of the movie you'd get your file done. Now it's all done within seconds, so it's definitely a fantastic product, and most people just rave about how it's changed their internet experience.
Okay. For the techies out there, since you are sort of the guru as far as the broadband service here, what sorts of things is Cox doing here to improve the service that people might have been getting over at home?
We have constructed a national backbone. We have built a lot of redundancy into the network. We're using state-of-the-art equipment. We also have the local troubleshooting with engineers on site. So we're really trying to just reinforce the reliability of the product, adding new features in that. So it's kind of the whole story now. We've got the network's under our control, and I think we can do a lot more with that as opposed to interfacing with a partner.
Mm-hmm. And people haven't been seeing streets being dug up or anything, so there's no new local cable being done. It's all being done sort of in the background?
That is correct. A lot of the national backbone is just connecting various Cox cities throughout the country with redundant rings and what have you. So the network from a local level is pretty much the same, although I will add that while customers are converting their services, there's a simultaneous conversion going on at some of our hub sites where we're redirecting some of the equipment that used to go to the at-home network into the Cox network, and that's usually invisible to the customers. It's done at midnight, and by the time people wake up in the morning, they're probably not even aware we did the work. That conversion itself, and now it's up to the customers to use the CD-ROM and make their settings changes.
Okay, let's go recap real quickly because, again, for people who didn't see the beginning of the show, the conversion kits, they're on their way out there right now?
Absolutely. They're on their way. Wait for it to come in. Please read through it, and most important thing, follow the instructions. Go to that member's site first before you insert the CD-ROM.
Okay. And if they haven't received the conversion kit by about the first week of February?
There's definitely a URL you can go to and order another one.
It's on the screen right now.
Absolutely, so definitely take advantage of that.
Okay. A question that some people might be wondering about is Macintosh versus PC. You know, most people have the PC. Do these kits work for both?
The kits do work for both. There is a level of Macintosh operating system that beyond 8.5 we support. Earlier than that, you'll have to convert the system, unfortunately. And primarily the reason for that is there's a level of Macintosh software that supports what we call DHCP, which is our way of getting IP addresses to a computer. And you have to have the Mac operating system that supports DHCP for this to work.
So that's 8.5 or above?
Yes.
So it goes back 3 or 4 years. So it's
absolutely.
Okay. And it supports the new OS 10?
Yes.
Okay, very good. We've got about a minute left, and maybe we should go over some of the options right now for getting help during the conversion process.
Definitely surface for all questions that could be answered. Next, definitely use your user's guide if you've received it. There's a wealth of information about how to set all your services up and how to troubleshoot. And last but not least, call the call center. But again, be patient if you do that, because there are a lot of people that might be in queue ahead of you.
Okay. And while at one point it is not a bad idea to get moving on this, should one get too concerned if they haven't been able to get this done by about the middle of February or so? What's our time? What's the urgency on this?
At the end of February, At Home basically locks the doors and turns the lights out. So you must do the conversion well before then. Our preference is earlier rather than later for a number of reasons. One, you can establish your email accounts before perhaps somebody else might. But secondly, if you're going to have any issues with the conversion, you can let us help you through those before the final date comes along. So definitely earlier is better than later.
Okay. And we should be, as soon as we get our new Cox.net address, we should let people know that it's changed, right?
That's a good point, because a lot of folks, it's almost like changing your telephone number. Some people are used to sending you email a certain way you might have business gate with, and you need to think about all the people that have that email address. That's important to know the new one and communicate that to them.
Okay. Let's take one more look now at some of the places you can get more information. First of all, the bottom of the screen there is the support.cox.net, and if you do need to make that call, 1-888-509-0003. Thank you very much, Rick, for being with us tonight. And we, of course, invite you to join us again next week as we take a look at another important subject facing us here in South Orange County, right here on Cox Forum.